Stuff. And applause would be nice too. All right. So if this clicker will work, is it advancing? Boom. There we go. Cool. So that was me, Myles Howell. So I am co-founder of a healthcare tech company called Bardavon Health Innovations. I actually started my career as a respiratory therapist originally and became really passionate about innovation, particularly in the healthcare system for how that could impact patients really in need of meaningful treatment. Some of the challenges I saw working as a clinician, for the most part, have really segued nicely into the business that we've built and also the patients that every day that we are working with. And for those of you that are also curious, that is indeed an old picture of me. So I don't think that blazer still fits. This is an even older one, and this is really what I'm here today to talk about. So this is kind of my journey, and what I want to share with you all is kind of the path that led me to entrepreneurship, what that path was like, what the realities of being an entrepreneur, kind of were growing a business from, kind of the ground up. And then I also wanted to share, if I were to put my student hat back on and sit in the same classroom you guys are sitting in, what are the things that I really would want to know and the things that I wish I would have learned as a student? So as you can see here, lots of fun stuff. I won't go through all of this, but as I mentioned, started my career as a respiratory therapist, pretty much immediately became frustrated with how bureaucratic and kind of just disorganized and really just not structured the healthcare system was. And I realized in that moment, there's really only so much of an impact I could make as a clinician. So I decided to quit doing that. I enrolled in UMKC, and I was actually in, I believe, the first class in this building. Yeah, so first and the worst, if I'm not mistaken. Probably in this one. I don't know. So either way, so grad school here, I started consulting during that time with a healthcare advisory firm called Pershing Yokely Associates. And I specialized in some of the innovation coming out of the Affordable Care Act and specifically deployment of it at a clinical level. Started doing that, I think 2013, loved it, and then had accepted a job actually in New York City going into beginning of 2014. And I was actually introduced to one of my now partners at Bardavon who convinced me to not go to New York, to stay here in Kansas City and to focus on building a tech startup, here in Kansas City. So said, well, investment banking sounds fun. Making a real meaningful impact in healthcare seems like more fun. So I decided to do that. Lots of fun stuff since then, as you can see. Held a million different roles at Bardavon, as we've grown the company. But my main focus has always been on strategy. So corporate strategy, what are the products we want to bring to market? How can we differentiate? And then what, as an organization, do we need to do to structure the business for success? It's kind of always been my focus. I think it was about 5 years ago, I started getting more involved civically and joined UMKC as a mentor and advisor to the entrepreneurship programs through the Rainier Institute. So have been very fortunate to work with you guys over the past several years. And this is one of the things that I always, really enjoy every month to be a part of these discussions. So that's enough about me. The reason I do love entrepreneurship, though, is for me, like starting a business, building something from scratch is really the business of making dreams turn into reality, right? It's literally the only business you can go into where you can identify a problem, one that maybe no one has ever seen before, or maybe one that everyone's seen, but no one's had the courage to attempt to solve. And you can roll your sleeves up and try to build something meaningful that can help address that problem or kind of serve that need. So to me, there's something just really fun about entrepreneurship. Some of the other things I love about it are, for those of you that are creative, it's kind of like you can strip away all of the different barriers to being as creative as you want to be. So whatever you can dream up, you can probably build it. Doesn't mean you can build it tomorrow, right? But over time, you can start working towards a really creative vision for what tomorrow can look like. I think that for me has been very fulfilling, but also having probably moderately severe ADD, being able to think creatively and focus on a wide variety of problems is something that just has been personally very fulfilling for me. The other thing that I absolutely love about entrepreneurship, especially as I work with, younger entrepreneurs and people who may be starting a company for the first time, is it's really the business where you get to inspire others. You get to see, employees and team members grow in ways that they never thought they could. You also get to motivate people in really meaningful ways and watch them, sometimes fail, but always grow, learn, become stronger as a result. For me, that was always really rewarding. And also, if I take a step back and think about some of these successful startups in Kansas City and even nationally, a big part of the entrepreneurial journey is, at the end of it, it's really about helping support future entrepreneurs. So investing back in your community, not just investing in other startups, but investing your time and resource into programs that help cultivate really the next generation of entrepreneurs, which, hopefully is you guys at some point. So that's kind of why I love entrepreneurship and why it's, so meaningful to me. It's now growth strategy. So a little bit about Bardavon. I won't spend too much time on this, but just so you guys have context. So Bardavon is a healthcare tech company. Our focus is really on physical therapy, musculoskeletal health. We have a network of 30,000 clinicians across the country that leverage our technology every single day to treat patients. What we then do is we have a team of data scientists and highly skilled clinicians that sit here in Kansas City. And what they do is they actually oversee every single patient being treated through our platform. And they identify, kind of the best treatment options available for that clinician to help not just personalize treatment, which we do, but help make sure that those patients get the best care possible and recover to the highest, really their highest ability. So it's kind of how the network, and we call that the network, how that works. We then package that as a benefit. We sell that to large Fortune 100 companies like Walmart and Amazon for them to offer it to their employee base, kind of as a benefit. So if, let's say a Walmart, let's say a stockroom worker gets hurt, they have access to this recovery platform that can help, from an end-to-end perspective, guide their recovery, get them back to work and get them healthy so they can, not just continue working, but enjoy time with their family. So it's really holistically focused on the needs of each individual, but also not just focused on cutting costs, but focus on accelerating recovery and improving clinical outcomes. So that's kind of how it works. I talked through this. There's a lot of different products that we've built, that we bring to market that make up our solution set. So I won't go through all of this, but we have a lot of tech products, but also services and things like that we offer. I mentioned end-to-end kind of life cycle for musculoskeletal health, physical therapy recovery. We actually start, our focus initially is to prevent injuries in the first place. So we actually have a suite of preventative health services, digital, wellness platforms, wearable sensors, things like that help reduce the risk of somebody getting injured. Then we have the full network platform I mentioned earlier. So if God forbid somebody does get hurt, we're going to work like hell to give them the best care possible and get them back to work safely at the highest functional ability. I already kind of talked through this. Main point, package it, sell it to large companies. We kind of live in a weird middle spot in the market. So we actually sit between 30,000 clinicians all over the country and large Fortune 100 companies. So we kind of serve everybody in that circumstance. We view our clinicians all over the country as partners. We treat them as such. We help support them in every way we can. And then we view the large employers as the clients that we sell to. But also, most importantly, our entire platform is designed to focus on the needs of the individual. So that is kind of in a nutshell what Bardavon is. A little bit about our journey before I jump into kind of growth strategy and things like that. So we did start in 2014. We raised initial capital. If I'm not mistaken, I think we got our first investor commitment my final day of finals. when I was in the MBA program. And literally, I don't think I had slept in 3 days, but it was the best Friday ever. So anyways, launched in 2014, raised initial capital, brought a product to market. We're very fortunate and very lucky to be able to grow consistently over the last 10 years. And in 2020, we're able to raise what I would consider to be meaningful capital and to really go big. So we've gone through several acquisitions since then, introduced new products and things like that to market, have grown tremendously. But it's kind of been, for those of you who've spent any time researching entrepreneurship, it's never really a hockey stick in terms of growth in reality, more like a roller coaster that, if you're lucky, begins to climb upwards. And that's kind of what it has been more or less for us as well. All right, so here we go. So let's talk a little bit about growth strategy. So not just our journey, but what I wanted to start doing about a year ago was take a step back from kind of our experience at Bardavon and begin codifying how we can, really begin to build a, not so much a roadmap, but a guide for entrepreneurs for how they can begin building companies and what that journey can look like and what the different stages are. So for me, when I look at what growth means, there's a lot of different definitions out there. For me, growth is revenue. So what do we need to do to grow, our volume of business, revenue, and monetization of the company? So that's kind of the prime directive for us. The thing that I learned the hard way, though, is revenue isn't as straightforward as I think we would all hope that it is. So the thing that I've came to realize over introducing new products, raising capital, and things like that, is every dollar that we receive is not really created equally. So things like pricing model, client vertical, the size of the commitment they're making, all of those things drastically impact how, let's say, the investment community might view each dollar, right? If you sell a 5-year contract that's a monthly subscription model to Walmart for, whenever that happens, those dollars are going to be viewed differently than $5,000 from a mom and pop, PT store here in Kansas City, right? So not every dollar is created equally. And that is important because you need to understand that as your company evolves over time and as you're growing the business. There's also both strategic and tactical considerations, as I mentioned. So you can structure pricing agreements in a way that may be. So a good example of this would be like a SaaS-based pricing model versus a licensing model, right? The finance market values SaaS-based recurring revenue companies far higher than a company that maybe gets a $200,000 licensing fee model or licensing revenue model. So all of those things are important to understand for how strategically you structure the business. But then there's tactical considerations too. So if like this pricing model helps you get to market sooner, you need market validation, quickly to close capital or to do whatever you need to do. There may be some, circumstances where pursuing a different pricing model, while not strategic, may be tactically aligned with what you need to do in that moment. So fun stuff. This kind of digs a little bit further into that. So I mentioned pricing and revenue recognition, so pricing model, things like that. So those really fall into what I would consider a business model validation, kind of standpoint, but also they impact valuation. So again, how your revenue comes in, the structure it's priced under, the level of commitment, all of those things make a big difference. And Bardavon's operated under a variety of pricing models, some good, some bad. And I've also gone through the pain of, kind of consolidating those and aligning those with where as a company we want to evolve into. So again, if I had thought further ahead when we were starting, I think we would have probably structured some of our models in a way that maybe aligned a little bit better with where we wanted to go. So pilot revenue. So as you're in the early stages of starting a business, this is obviously critical. You'll probably discount it heavily. But again, as you're raising initial capital, the investors need a reason to believe in your company. And nothing creates belief more than, a dollar coming into the bank account from somebody who believes in your product and they want to buy it. So if you take a further step back and you look at maybe not what initial go-to-market looks like, but over a 2 or 3 year horizon, having consistent revenue growth is critical because that will basically create validation with not just your investors, which it will, but also with your client base, because it means they're not the only one. People are continuing to believe in your mission and vision and the product. They're continuing to buy and entrench themselves and working with you. So focusing relentlessly on growing revenue in the healthiest way you can is critically important to validation of the business, as is retention. So one of the things that is super important is never losing sight of your clients. So retention of your business, of your clients, of your revenue is one of the biggest factors that investors will look for, because it's an ongoing demonstration of, the value of your product, that's differentiated, that's meaningful. On the flip side, high attrition of your clients is probably the biggest red flag you could have. So you have to be very aware of that. And I'll kind of talk through as we get to the next few slides for how that segues into, the ongoing growth of a business. Channel product diversification. So this is one of the things that I have owned historically in my role with Bardavon. So one of the things that's really important, especially if you're a tech company that's looking for a big exit, is being able to show how your company and how your products can offer value in markets outside of just your current core market. So that could be, literally repackaging a product you already have in market, selling it into like a new industry vertical or something like that. Or it could be, creating a, new line of business that helps, validate a, kind of new market segment or something like that. So for example, for us, so we initially went to market with a physical therapy network sold to large employers to service their employees for workers' compensation. What we found, though, is structurally it's the same as what a similar network model could look like for like a Blue Cross Blue Shield or for an Aetna or somebody on the group health side. So one of the things I was responsible for was repackaging our core line of business, selling into that new market. And that's critically important as you're getting a little bit further along in the company's journey, because that really demonstrates how the company really can continue to offer value, not just in terms of immediately where you are, but how it can continue to evolve and support new markets and grow. And all of those things are huge factors when you look at valuations and strategic partnership value and stuff like that. Okay, so font's a little small on that TV, but I think I have this memorized. So this is kind of the life cycle for me of what a startup company can look like. Again, this isn't probably the best academic definition, but this is kind of what each segment means to me. So when you're starting a business, you have your proof of concept phase. So for us, that was pulling together a team of 4 people, huddling in a sublease 10 by 10 office and hammering out some code so that we could have something that was actually viable, that we could license to a provider and show that this can create value so we could raise capital. So some of the initial, kind of key objectives for that phase, you need to create at least a MVP product. So something that can be sold. It's not going to be scalable. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be perfect, but it needs to be a real product that can be sold, right? You also need to develop what I would consider to be alpha level client relationships. So you need to sell to somebody who's willing to work with you to iterate on the product. That's super important because when you go to market initially, the product will never be perfect. It will never perfectly meet the client's needs. But if you're able to pick the right client and build a collaborative relationship, they can give you all of the feedback you need for customizing the product and also making it far more scalable and meaningful to your client base. Referenceable relationships. I think Cliff Illig actually is the one that told me this a long time ago. So every client relationship that you build needs to be one that should become referenceable. So best case scenario, you want every client you sell to be willing to answer the phone if a prospective client calls and at least give a good recommendation to those prospective clients. So that should be kind of the goal for all client engagements, especially early on. There's a lot of ways you can get there. Building a collaborative relationship is one way that I think works pretty well. Obviously, you'll offer initially when you take a product to market, you'll offer a lot of discounts and things like that, typically to incentivize them to want to say yes, right? But the client reference is huge. All of that ties pretty nicely into early validation for the business. So being able to sell a product, being able to support the delivery of a product, and then being able to get a client to say, yes, this product creates value. That's kind of the initial validation that you need to create to get through the proof of concept stage. Again, it's not perfect, doesn't follow this, exact trajectory. That should be the goal. Case studies, I kind of mentioned that. That should be part of the referenceable relationships. Early validation market demands. So this is pretty critical. So when you're in this stage, it's really hard to sell a large volume of product, but you can drum up a fair amount of interest. So if you have, at the end of the stage, a decently sized sales pipeline, maybe you can't deliver on it today, but you have, let's say $1 million worth of interested, clients. That is something that's critically important as you're raising initial capital because they are investing in what you will look like in 5 years, not what you look like today. And that's the best way you can show them, what you can look like in just a few years. So critically important. Talked about lighthouse clients, small to mid-size. This is also where you get into typically like friends and family capital. So you're going to bootstrap typically at this stage, and then raise a little bit of capital, likely from people close to you. We were able to. So several of my partners have done a few different exits or have started a few different companies previously and been able to kind of sell those. So we were able to start with a little bit more capital on hand than a few, most startups probably do. But typically, this is where you'd have, friends and family capital, just enough to build a product and get into market to a point where, you can convince an investor this is real, this is meaningful, we know what we're doing, we know where we're headed. Yes.
Maybe could you talk a little like who some of the alpha clients were initially, and what was the pitch? What was the story?
So our alpha client was Seaboard Foods, and alpha/2 was Cosentino Foods. So our pitch was to Seaboard Foods, basically, you already have somebody managing your physical therapy today. We're literally just going to take their spot. You're not going to pay us $1 more than what you're paying today, but we believe you will save a significant amount of money in working with us. They also, at that time, had this client had some emerging needs that were very specific to what we were bringing to market, which was aligned very nicely with us timing-wise. And then I think we ended up saving them like 80% of what they were spending previously over a 2-year period. So we built a case study with them. Second client, Cosentino's, it was kind of a similar pitch. They were a little bit more interested, if I remember correctly, in kind of the preventative health aspects of it. So that kind of forced us to think through positioning a little bit more broadly than just like our initial kind of go to market, which was super helpful. But both of those were very collaborative discussions. It was, sitting down, like, here's what we're doing, here's what we're bringing to market. We know this isn't perfect, but we would love to work with you to customize this to something that is exactly what you were looking for, and we're committed to doing that. So it's kind of that kind of pitch. Also heard no a lot, but those were kind of the first 2 big yeses. Then as we got a little bit further along, we were able to secure some far larger national clients that helped us mature kind of in different ways too. So I can talk a little bit more about those here in a moment. Does that kind of answer your question? The pitch is really fun, by the way, for those of you who never pitched a new product where nobody has said yes to it, and you're really not you're not 100% certain it's going to work. It's kind of a fun experiment.
How did you make a case to say?
Yeah, so they were willing to basically give us some of the data that they had on their like current spend for their workers' compensation program. We analyzed it, or I analyzed it actually. I was also our BA at that time too. and came back with a proposal and said, this is what we think we can do. We want to start here in this market. Here's what we think we can save. We don't save this in year one, fire us. And you lose nothing. That was kind of the pitch. So, just super fun, by the way. So it's kind of the proof of concept phase. So as we move into early stage, this is where you really begin to get the product further in market. So this is where you go from a handful of initial clients to maybe a dozen to 2 dozen, clients in market. This is where you're probably generating up to about $1 million, in revenue. And this is really where you're beginning to enter the phase of being able to raise like what I would consider to be like, good real capital that can help really support the growth of a company. So it's kind of an exciting stage. It's also one of the most stressful because you typically go into the stage with very limited runway, right? You might have raised, $500,000 from friends and family. You might have 9 months of capital before you deplete it. So that kind of sets the window for how quickly you need to get through this stage, right? But this is where, again, you're beginning to go from alpha clients where everything's custom to more or less a standardized product that's in market. You're beginning to get real, positive feedback, hopefully at some form of scale from the clients, validating the offering. This is also where you actually begin to really get a good feel for how the delivery model for this product or service needs to evolve. So not just how do we bootstrap and all work together, but what do the teams need to look like? What does the technology and infrastructure really need to look like to scale this? And all of those kind of become inputs to like how much capital you need, what are the resources and leaders you need to bring on, and kind of things like that. This is also one of the most fun parts of this is also typically where you hire your first sales and marketing resources. So when you first get a market proof of concept, you are, CEO, COO, CFO, and chief sales officer, right? This is where you're actually able to typically bring on at least, a chief sales officer or a sales exec that can take some of that burden off your shoulders, although you're always involved in some form or fashion, in selling. But this is typically where you can bring on people to, actually begin putting together a sales strategy for you, begin developing a pipeline of interested, clients and things like that. All of those things help you harden, kind of the demand in the market, which is also critically important as you exit this stage, because again, investors are investing in who you can be in 5 years, not where you're at today, and having a solid pipeline and understanding of, what demand and things like that look like are all pretty critical to those discussions. Cost structure, kind of talked through that already. This is also a fun one in that this is where you begin to brainstorm on what inorganic growth can look like. So that typically can come in the form of, at this stage, strategic partnerships, things like that with maybe like-minded companies in the market that may be offering a materially different product to market, but begin to look at, how can we maybe, partner with this entity to couple our services a bit, help us, get in market, far more rapidly and things like that can fuel growth. As you get a little bit further, inorganic growth becomes M&A opportunities a lot of the time. So what are the companies out there that you could acquire that may give you, a new product in market, may give you some infrastructure that you desperately need, kind of things like that. Case studies, kind of mentioned that. This is where you get to formalize those a little bit. So one of the things that's incredibly valuable as you're selling and seeking investors is case studies that demonstrate the value of your product that are signed off on by clients. So this is where you kind of get to the stage of being able to put together, get to do meaningful analysis of the value your clients are getting. You put together, whether it's a 1-page or 3-page case study, whatever it is, then you get their sign off on it and their willingness to, kind of let you use that to promote to other clients and things like that. Pretty fun stage. So, let's see. So again, at this stage, you're beginning to probably increase the size of your client base a little bit. This is where maybe you go from, in this example, the Seaboard Foods of the world to, maybe a company a little bit larger. So, probably not quite the size of, like a Walmart at this stage, but maybe like a Lowe's or somebody like that you're piloting with. This is also where you begin to kind of harden like your pricing and packaging. So when you first go to market, typically you're going to customize everything and you're going to discount it because you need somebody to say yes. As you begin to get further in market, you begin to have a little bit more pricing control and packaging control so you can standardize it and hopefully not discount it, into a loss for you. So it's kind of where that begins to happen, which is always nice. Yeah. So growth stage. So for me, this was, I think all the stages were fun, exciting, difficult. This is probably the most fun stage, or it was at least for me personally. This is where you've really validated the product in the market. Investors believe in your story. You're able to raise a meaningful amount of money. So you may not be able to get all of your wish list items in terms of resources and things like that, but you're able to, not just bootstrap, constantly to make things work. You can actually start thinking more strategically, more creatively about how the company can evolve and actually have the resources to invest in some of those new strategies. This is where typically you go from a single product, single market, single channel company to a multi-product, multi-channel company. So for us, it was, we went to market with a physical therapy network, sold to employers for work comp. I already mentioned the group health model, but this is also where we started investing pretty heavily in organic growth. So we acquired a wearable sensor company to launch a preventative health offering. We also purchased a digital health company that had a musculoskeletal health wellness platform that you could download on your phone. So begin to started, acquiring new companies, bringing them into our product suite, selling into our existing customer base, but for materially different products and services and different pricing models and things like that. So kind of diversification in that regard. Kind of hit on inorganic growth. Business model product. By this stage, you should really have a pretty strong view for, what the business model looks like, cost structure, what it's going to take to scale it, things like that. And, kind of going through this stage, investors are going to expect you to have a really strong, understanding of that. And you will not find much forgiveness if you're wrong, kind of in some of those areas, if that makes sense. Growth and retention, super important. Mentioned that early on. It's also pretty compelling too, if you can also show to, investors in the market that your initial clients you went to market with are still on board, still referenceable. So if you can keep them satisfied, that for that full life cycle, that can be a pretty meaningful part of your story. And really they should be. Cross-selling new services, that's a key part of it. That's one of the things that we did through those 2 acquisitions. That can help fuel a huge amount of growth while also lessening your cost of sale. So if you're selling into existing clients for a new product or service, they already hopefully trust and believe in your story. So the actual cost to sell to them should be far lower. So that can be a huge, driver of growth, kind of in that phase. This is also where you get to really small amounts of customization. So at this stage, you're not doing a ton of discounts. You're not customizing the offering for every client. You typically are promoting a out-of-the-box offering unless it's a absolutely enormous client that has unique needs, or unless somebody is willing to compensate you for the work to customize the offering. So, and that's kind of how we, for the most part, operate today. All right, so lessons learned. So it's one of my favorite slides I ever put together, actually, fun fact. But it looks like I screwed up the JFK one in the middle. It's on me. These are some of the things I learned the hard way, just full disclosure. So one of the things I always try to think about in terms of sharing with students is, not so much sharing all the goodness that we've done or, I've done in this context. What are the things that, I missed and some of the mistakes I made that had I known earlier, could have helped avoid some of the biggest challenges we dealt with. So first one is building the right team. You're going to spend a lot of time working with people and you're going to have a lot of trust in them. So you need people that can be not just leaders, but doers, right? Everybody in an entrepreneurial setting should also be a contributor. So, You might have a head of marketing who in a perfect world would have a staff of 20 underneath him or her. That individual also needs to be able to develop content if you need it, because things happen very rapidly in a startup environment. You need people who can not just lead, but people who can also do. And they need to be good people too. So we have a motto, I learned it from my partner, Matt Condon. It's not just enough to be good at what you do, you have to be a good person too. And it's very true. Never lose sight of the client. So this is super important. So the clients aren't just somebody that writes you a check. Clients should be a collaborative, creative partner for you as you're building products. If you do it right, just like the Seaboard example and the Cosentino's example, you'll go to market with something that you believe is mostly right, but in order to get it completely right, you need the feedback and support of the clients you're selling into, right? So it should be a collaborative experience where you're constantly seeking their feedback, you're constantly seeking their ideas, and all of those things will become gold as you're looking to, scale the business. And if you do lose sight of the client, then you risk attrition and all of those things that, for a company of this stage can be, pretty catastrophic, right? Relentlessly work to improve every aspect of the business. This has been like kind of a focus for me since inception. For me, good, great, all of that is kind of irrelevant. The focus is always how can we be better? Like, how can we make decisions more quickly? How can we reduce the touch of delivering our service? How can we be more efficient? And also, how can we deliver more value to our clients? Those things should always be what you're working relentlessly for. And it could be, relentlessly working to avoid, creating a bureaucratic environment. We've gone through, a lot of scenarios where, the pendulum has swung towards adding, more structure, more layers, things like that. That can come at the expense of, kind of slowing down decision-making process, eliminating feedback from people who, maybe are servicing the clients on the ground floor and have the best ideas. So you always need to work relentlessly to make the company better in every way that you can. Decision-making vacuum. So this kind of ties into last one, right? So vacuum and canyon. So vacuum would be basically creating an environment where teams are entirely empowered to make decisions on their own, regardless of the strategic alignment with the business. So you want to empower teams, you want to give them authority, but there also needs to be a middle ground where you can ensure that the decisions being made align with the direction the company needs to go. And the canyons is, sitting at a table, if you've ever been at this table where a huge problem comes up and somebody asks, okay, well, whose responsibility is this? So it falls into a canyon or a void and nobody wants to take responsibility or accountability for it. You always need to have a very clear delineation of who is responsible for what, who's the decision maker for what. And that as a leader is what allows you to create accountability, and things like that within your company. North Star for the business. So this has been very near and dear to my heart. So I created a 45-page strategic plan for our business when we were initially going to market. I think I was moonlighting as a student here at the time. Built it, was so proud of it, sent it to our investors. Nobody read it. Found about 6 months later after we initially went to market, a lot of goodness in there. Most of it was wrong, and the company needed to pivot pretty quickly. So for me, it's really important to have a North Star that the entire company is working towards, but to also recognize that the North Star can change as you need to pivot the business. But you need to have alignment across the entire company for where strategically the company is heading and how the tactical decisions and activities that they're doing contribute towards that broader vision. I think JFK, it was a program. So back when when the United States was trying to get to the moon, it was critically important that everybody that was involved in the program understood essentially what they were truly working, towards. And all the way down to the janitor level, their job is not to, clean the floors. Their job is to put a man on the moon. And they are a meaningful contributor towards that vision. It's really important that every staff member understands not just where you're heading, but why what they're doing is so incredibly important towards that journey. Small wins. So this is one of this has historically been a qualm for me with some of our leadership team in that we'll have a lot of big wins that get a lot of press and things like that, which are great. But we fixate so much on getting the big wins, we overlook occasionally some of the smaller but meaningful wins. And the truth is, when you're building a company, very rarely is it going to, completely be driven by three things, right? Three successes. It's going to be driven by 1,000 different small wins that hundreds of people will contribute to. So it's really important that as a leader, you recognize each of those small wins. You give recognition to the team members that contribute towards it. And you also help motivate the rest of the team to continue working towards, kind of the strategy of the company and things like that. It's a really good way of getting buy-in from your team members, but also hopefully recognizing how each one of them makes a meaningful impact in the company. Startup hustle culture in a healthy manner. I've gone through phases, and I think Dean Class probably seen me in these phases before, where I'll work 100 hours a week or some ridiculous amount of time, and I'll get to, Saturday morning or whatever, and just, be completely dead for the rest of the weekend or whatever it is. So the startup culture is really important to maintain because it helps build collaboration, connectivity, alignment, a kind of environment where employees feel naturally empowered to work together and everybody has buy-in and we're all working towards the same goal. That's critically important, but you have to balance that with doing it in a healthy way, right? So team members that work maybe 40 hours or 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, whatever it is, that feel empowered and valued will create typically the same amount of value as somebody who works 80 hours a week who maybe doesn't, kind of feel the same way with how their work is viewed. So it's really about maintaining a culture that's very collaborative, very inclusive, very forgiving, because hustle fouls happen constantly. I make 50 mistakes a day or whatever it is. So you really want to maintain that culture because that's how you continue to facilitate internal collaboration, problem solving, things like that. But you also need to recognize that everybody has a life outside of work and be respectful of that. So that's one of the things, just full disclosure, historically, I've not done a good job of personally for myself, but I do think it's critically important for everybody in the business to recognize. Fail fast with a space between I and L for some reason. Well, does fail fast fail reasonably often? So for me, I see a lot of startups that I advise get stuck in the ideation phase because they fixate on creating the perfect product. No way you can do it, especially initially. So you have to have a willingness and a belief in yourself and the business to, bring this product to market, recognize it could fail, you could get, harsh feedback, things like that. Because you have to do that. You have to have the courage to do that in order to get the feedback you need to refine it. And the feedback may be terrible, I've launched with clients for new offerings that have fired us almost immediately because it didn't solve the problem. But had we not done that, it could have sat in ideation, strategic group for 16 months, brought it to market, failed after, putting a ton of resource on or whatever it is. So you have to have a willingness to, take strategic bets. The caveat is, unlike what I would say for, maybe the Google culture where fail fast, break, everything. When you're in a startup environment, you have finite resources, so you have to make sure the bets that you do take, that you do believe in, are the ones where you can also generate the most value. So you have to be kind of strategic about that, but you need to have the courage to not be afraid to fail. Pivot. So as I mentioned, we went to market initially with basically a Cerner-like platform, and what we found was the provider market that we were selling into didn't have the financial means to buy the product from us. So that is a fundamental issue, right? For a business model that is planning to license software for providers for revenue, right? So for us, we pivoted. We took a step back. We looked at the value that this platform was creating. We recognized that employers who are actually have their employees being treated through this platform are really the biggest recipient of the value of the platform. They're the ones that are getting their injured employees back to work sooner. They're paying less in, healthcare costs and things like that. And their employees are typically more satisfied and happy with the treatment that they get. So we pivoted to a different pricing and monetization model, really in a matter of months, and that became our core line of business that we've scaled since. So you can't pivot every single week, but you also have to have the confidence and the courage to pivot when you need to strategically. Because as you're bringing something to market, if you listen carefully, the market will give you a pretty clear picture for what the company needs to look like, how the product needs to work, and things like that. So you do have to have a willingness to be flexible and to pivot like as needed. You just don't want to constantly be pivoting, or you're never going to get a real product to market. Those are my 9 lessons learned. I think we have 1 or 2 more slides. So my advice to you guys, so when I left MBA program, I understood finance, accounting, a lot of goodness stuff there. Was not a good public speaker. It's something I would have certainly worked on previously. But some of the things that as a student, like I would tell myself today, I'm telling you all today, is one of the things that's helped me throughout my career is always taking the next step. So when in doubt, take the initiative to take the extra step. So if you're in a meeting, with somebody, even if it's a 30-minute lunch meeting or something like that, take 30 minutes to put together a PowerPoint that very succinctly captures, kind of what you're pitching to them, even if it's just an idea, things like that. And eventually, the truth is those things rarely go unnoticed. There was a student that interned for Bardavon, Thomas Colgrove, who was just the hardest worker and so diligent when it came to like structuring agendas, sending out meeting follow-ups and things like that. All of that stuff is always noticed, even if it's not communicated back to you guys. Give people more than they expect. So somebody told me this when I was like 19, and I've kind of tried to embody this ever since. So this kind of gets into the ethos of, when somebody is working with you, you want to not just satisfy whatever it is they're there for, but you want to exceed their expectations and make them excited to want to work with you again, whatever capacity it is. And that ties into going the extra step, but also ties into like how you communicate, how you engage with them, how you collaborate, and how you carry yourself. But constantly over delivering is one of the things I've always tried to strive for. And that's super important with clients too. Listen more than you speak. So I used to talk constantly. I still probably do. One of the things I learned was as you're building something, especially for the first time, you need to be constantly in learning mode, and you need to constantly glean as much as you can from everybody that you work with. And also as you're working with clients and even investors and team members and things like that, if you listen carefully, they'll give you very clearly what their needs are, what they care about, things like that help you frame, how you're going to support them and service them and things like that. In order to do that, though, you need to give enough space and create an environment where they're comfortable to share more than listen, right? Be the first to follow up. So I still do this today. So for me, whenever I'm meeting with somebody, I want to be the first person when I get back to my laptop to send a follow-up to them, thanking them for their time, highlighting whatever next steps we agreed to and things like that. That always goes noticed. It's always a big deal. It's always helpful. It also helps you, though, make sure that whatever next steps you articulate back to, the client or whomever you're meeting with are, top of mind, things like that. It's a lot easier to schedule a meeting you agreed to than 30 minutes of a meeting than it is 2 weeks, right? So always be the first to follow up. This is also big. So I still fly out to Columbia, South Carolina, at least quarterly. We launched a strategic partnership 5 years ago with a Blue Cross Blue Shield entity that I think they're literally processing $1 billion worth of healthcare spend every single day. But anyways, we were launching a strategic partnership with them, and we could have done it virtually, but made the decision to fly down, at that stage initially, monthly, then it became quarterly. But the goal was to not just launch the partnership that we were, structuring with them, but we wanted to seed interest in, how this relationship could evolve. And they later became investors, broader strategic partners, huge advocates for us, referenceable. The relationship was well worth it. You can take that same approach even locally, though. There are a lot of meetings and things like that that might be easier to do, over Teams or Zoom or something like that. That if you take the extra step to meet in person, it helps you build a connection to them that's incredibly difficult to do over a computer and things like that. Similarly, it's easy to not respond to an email. It's really hard to not respond to somebody you're on the phone with, right? So, so I always try to meet in person every time I can. Coalition. So this is big for me, and this is kind of one of the main drivers for a lot of the work I do in Kansas City and the broader region. So for me, a successful startup, a successful entrepreneur can help dozens of other entrepreneurs become successful. In the same way as you're building your initial network and things like that, you should always be focused on how I can help, this person become successful. How can I, add value back to whatever their vision and dreams are? And then typically they'll, give you kind of the same level of support and stuff like that. So it's really about building a coalition for you to be successful, but also building relationships that you can follow you over the course of your career and life. There are people that I worked with when I was right out of college who, were mentors to me 10, 12 years ago, who to this day I still connect with. And I help them whatever way I can. They continue to support me as well. So it's really important to build a coalition. This is also super important. So take what you do seriously, but not yourself too seriously. So this is how I try to, for the most part, how I try to live my life, right? The work that I do, the programs I'm involved with, the civic initiatives I'm involved with, things like that, are all critically important and very serious. And I want to make sure that I'm always giving 110% of my focus to. But I also want to be somebody who's approachable. We're wired to laugh, have fun, be irreverent. So you need to also, for me, I would recommend trying to kind of carry a persona that's very engaging, welcoming, fun, somebody that people like being around, somebody that people can get comfortable with. One of my main focuses, especially when I was working with clients early on and also strategic partners, is my goal was to make the person sitting across the table from me as comfortable with me as humanly possible in the shortest amount of time. So it's hard to do that if I'm in a tie and all that, which I guess I'm in a blazer. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts for you guys. So I don't know how we're doing on time, but would love to hear kind of from you all. Questions, comments, feedback. Okay. Uh-huh. Super hard network. So the good thing about Kansas City, and if you're building a product, I can make a lot of connections for you. The great thing about Kansas City today that did not exist 10 years ago is there are a lot of organizations in the city that support early stage entrepreneurs. So you have Pure Pitch Rally, you have Launch KC, which I helped relaunch 2 years ago. Even the Rainier Institute and eScholars have resources available to support kind of those entrepreneurs. There are like organizations that can help support you, connect you to the right people. They also typically can give launch KCs as an example, non-dilutive funding and things like that, but also network. So kind of Google, like one of the things I did early on was I literally just Google searched who are the successful entrepreneurs that are in like my same industry that are in this region, and I want to get in front of them however I can. Very rarely will somebody that's maybe built a company, sold it in a similar industry, decline a meeting from somebody who's just now starting to start a business. So it's kind of this life cycle where you build something, hopefully it's successful, you sell it, then you help support, other entrepreneurs and other people that want to, kind of pursue their ventures. But I'm happy to connect with you to talk more about it if that's kind of the stage that you're at. Okay. All right. No, you're good. Yes. So other questions? I think I saw hands over here. Yes, shoot. So yes, but no. So for us, we're acquiring the entire company. So their brand, their product, their tech, their resources and team, all of that. So we're typically buying that company. We'll merge the branding with our own, typically depending on, what channel they're selling into. As far as like rebuilding something, without acquiring them, wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're Larry Ellison, if you've done due diligence on them. But yeah, so the approach you take when you're doing M&A is, it's a build by partner decision, right? So can we build this, capability? Yes, no. What would it cost? Can we partner with a commercially available, solution out there to offer this? Yes, no. What would it cost? Or is there a company out there that we could acquire, get everything we need, and then be able to operate it entirely under our, brand and hood? And then it typically just becomes a strategic decision, which one is the most cost effective, which one gives us the most control over what we consider to be our crown jewel, products and things like that. So that's kind of the process that you take. And it's not like if you take an M&A course, it seems very linear, very structured and all of that. Due diligence is, but the actual process for identifying them, for structuring the deal, things like that, is definitely there's science behind it, but there's also kind of an art to it too, and it's different every time. So it's a good question though. Okay, so yes. Yes, so short answer is both. So having worked as a clinician previously and then being able to work on the policy side across the industry, I had a pretty solid view for what the needs of the industry were. That I would chalk up to research, because that's how I originally kind of generated or developed that understanding. So when we were launching, we had a pretty solid view for what we thought the needs of the market were. We did tons of research, market research, soliciting feedback from prospective clients, things like that. We were obviously, as I mentioned earlier, initially wrong with what some of our key assumptions were. So we had to pivot and, move to a different, kind of pricing monetization model. But yeah, it should be a combination of like real world experience that you're building, but also copious amounts of research where you can. And another thing too is you can also piggyback off of what other, startups and other successful companies have done, because typically they'll reference, the research and things like that they've done. So good question. Shoot. It's a great question. There are a lot of employees at Bardavon that are now, VPs and key leaders who I hired when they were, a lot of cases, a UMKC student, who were, doing their first job and things like that. So for me, being able to work with people that, I recruited 10 years ago, with this idea, without being able to say, confidently, you'll have a job in 6 months based on our funding. But to be able to see them go from, kind of a student or early in their career to grow, to learn, to build confidence, and then seeing them just kind of like, continue to like grow and expand, but also be able to think more creatively, to have them change my mind on strategic things. So that's probably the best, most rewarding part of the whole journey to me, is just seeing people grow. Because then, for me as an entrepreneur, maybe I do something after this, maybe I don't, but I know that they will. So it's kind of cool to be able to see, this is the beginning of their journey too, and then get excited about what they'll go on to do. So that's probably my favorite part. Shoot. Oh my goodness. Well, for me, I always go back to what are the things that frustrate me every day. Um, I'm a clinician. I've worked in healthcare for 15 years or however long it's been. I still don't know like which specialist to go see, how to schedule an appointment, and things like that for most of my healthcare needs. So I think some form of direct access um, where people are empowered to actually, not just make clinical decisions, but are connected in a way that makes it, efficient and usable to actually, meet with clinicians and things like that is probably part of it. There's a ton of innovation going on in genetics and things like that. There's a company that I helped launch that they're literally designing treatments that clone the cells in your body that help regrow tissue. So that if you were to get in a car accident and get severely injured, they can literally inject these cells into your body to help accelerate your own recovery. So maybe you're not in the ICU for 2 weeks, you're there for 48 hours. So there's a lot of really cool innovations like that going on. But I go back to the basics, like what are the things that piss me off every day? And figuring out how to get my prescription filled is one of those. So I think to me, like an actual, usable platform for you to, engage in whatever your treatment needs are. That'd be the one I think would make the biggest difference. This was awesome, by the way. So I hope this was helpful. I had a lot of fun putting it together. Yes.